I used to think a sourdough sandwich loaf was a good jumping off point for people that are just getting into sourdough bread baking. You know, kind of a good beginner bread project because there's minimal equipment and it's, you know, fewer steps than if you were making a round or an oval or something else that would get cold proofed in a basket in the fridge. I think it's still a good project for somebody who's new to bread baking, but there's one place where I see everybody kind of stumbling, and I have a solution for that. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about the end of bulk fermentation and timing of the dough. So a sourdough sandwich loaf is generally a same-day bread project for me. And starter gets activated at night at 10 p.m. or something like that. It usually takes 9 p.m. It usually takes about 10 hours to come up to peak activation. So it looks like this in the jar. And at 7 a.m., 10 hours later, 9 p.m., 7 a.m., I mix my dough, go through mixing, go through the stretching and folding process, and then we go through bulk fermentation. And that's where this batch of dough is. This is a 450 gram batch of dough. 450 grams is purely my flour weight. Of course, it weighs more than that with the starter, the water, and the salt. But your flour is the constant that we can, do percentages, do math off of to scale up and down with recipes. Anyway, I'll put the recipe down in the link, but this is not about making a sandwich loaf from start to finish. We're gonna jump in where I see a lot of people struggle. And they're struggling because either they don't understand their environment yet, and that's cool, it just takes time. And as the seasons change, timing might change also. Right now it's summertime where I am, it's 81 degrees in my kitchen. That is very warm. In the wintertime, it's gonna be like 65 degrees in my kitchen. So I have to adjust with my seasons. At the end of bulk fermentation, I feel like I get a lot of people who reach out and are, it's 9 o'clock, it's time for me to shape my dough, but then it's gonna be ready to bake at 2 in the morning or something, because after bulk fermentation, we shape it, we put it into our loaf pan, and then we let it go through its final proofing. So the phases of the dough, right? We've got mixing, easy, mix our dough. Stretching and folding, there's 4 of them, 30 to 45 minutes apart. And then there's bulk fermentation, which is just a phase of doubling in volume, doubling in size. This guy looked like this about, what time is it? About 4 hours ago. So this has been bulk fermenting for 4 hours. This is ready to be shaped. And if you've missed the mark on your timing and it's 9 o'clock or it's 8 o'clock and bulk fermentation took 6 hours or 7 hours instead of 4 to 6 hours or whatever the case is, all is not lost. And the best thing to do at this point, if you've gotten to a point where like you have to leave or you've run out of time, the day is over and you've got no chance of it proofing overnight and baking, because for me, if I try and shape this into a loaf pan and final proof it overnight, it's gonna look like this. This is bad. This is no good. This guy is so full of air, it's not gonna make good sandwiches. It's gonna have a big open crumb. This guy's a mutant. Not my desired outcome, right? I was lucky to even get the Tupperware container, my lid, off of this thing. I'm not gonna shape this right now. I'm gonna pretend that it's 9 o'clock at night and I don't have time to do this and I can't let it go overnight. So what are we gonna do with it? I'm gonna put it in the fridge. Before I do, I'm gonna do one thing. I'm gonna knock all the air out of it. Just like I would do a stretch and fold, I'm just gonna stretch and fold this and I'm gonna put it in the fridge. So if you find yourself in a position where it's way too late to shape this into your loaf pan and go through your final proofing, which could take 4 hours, here we are. This is what you do. All right, so just like in the stretching and folding process, I know I'm not going through the whole thing. We're just troubleshooting this place where people seem to find themselves in trouble. Just like in our stretching and folding, wet hands, and I'm gonna knock a lot of the air out of this, because if I don't, and it's 9 o'clock at night and I try and put this in the fridge, there's ambient temperature in the dough. The dough is room temperature, right? So it's gonna take a while for it to cool off in the fridge. While it's cooling off, it's gonna continue to expand. If it does that, it's gonna pop the lid off of my container and it's gonna be like this, and it's gonna be in the fridge and it's gonna be drying out on all the sides that are exposed to the refrigerator. All right, I'm gonna pull this guy out. And just regular kind of stretch and fold process. I'm gonna tuck a side under, 90-degree turn, and just kind of work my way around. It's really full of air and volume. You're gonna see big air pockets like this one. Let's see, is it even visible in the camera on my white t-shirt? But it's right there. And I'm cool with letting these guys explode because I know tomorrow it's gonna be just fine. The dough has a lot more energy in it than you might think. So I took some air out of it, put it back in the container, created tension on the surface, and now it's gonna go in the refrigerator until tomorrow. And it's actually 1:30 in the afternoon. So I'm really gonna push this to the limit of like just some kind of cold proofing. Just so you can see, like, it doesn't matter if it's in the fridge for a long period of time, it's still gonna come back to life tomorrow when we go to shape it. And this is what is happening. This is going in the fridge just like this. Tomorrow morning at 7 a.m., I'm gonna take it out. We're gonna shape it just like we normally do. And then it's gonna have to go through a final proofing in the loaf pan, which is gonna take longer because the dough is gonna be cold. I'll see you in the morning. We'll continue on with this project and we're gonna turn this into a sandwich loaf. We're bailing out. We're bailing out because we ran out of time. I mean, we're just pretending. I'm just pretending. But when you find yourself in the situation where you don't have enough time to final proof and bake your loaf because it's 9 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night and don't do it. Don't sacrifice your sleep to make a loaf of bread. It's not worth it. Bread's important, but not that important. Okay, so this morning I got up at 6:30. Last we left off, it was 1:30 in the afternoon. So 1:30 p.m. to 6:30 a.m. What is that? Is that like 17 hours or something like that? That our dough was in the fridge. And when I opened the fridge, I saw this, not the thing I really want to see, but clearly there's a ton of energy in my dough, right? I've got a really rambunctious starter and it gets my dough very rambunctious too. Now, if you were going in the real life situation of we're bailing out into the refrigerator, if you'd put this into the fridge at 9 p.m. and then shaped it at 6:30 or 7 a.m. the next day, this wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have popped a container off. I suppose I could have used a larger container or a bowl or something and it would have been fine. But given that I did go 17 hours of cold proofing essentially, my dough did expand and pop out. And it does have a little bit of a dry section here on the edge of the dough, but it's gonna be fine. Not the end of the world. See, this is cool. So I'm having a little bit of a thing happen and you can see that we just work right through it. No big deal. Okay, so shaping, the dough is really cold. So you're gonna have to really encourage it to kind of open up. And I shape mine on this marble block and I'm gonna stretch it out to just about the size of the marble block. The dough is cold, we don't need a ton of flour. You can see I put very little flour on it and I'm not gonna add any more beyond this. So we'll go over shaping just because it's a little different with cold dough. It's gonna take some time to encourage it to be big enough to kind of fold it up into a shape. If you were feeling really lazy, you could take this out of the container and try and put it into your loaf pan, but I don't recommend it. We wanna create tension in the dough again so it can pull on itself and expand. So I've stretched down to a big rectangle. I'm gonna go kind of a book fold where, right to the middle, left to the middle, and then kind of an envelope fold from there where I'm gonna take the bottom to the top and then like the 6 o'clock side to the middle and then the 12 o'clock side slightly over the 6 o'clock side. And now we're gonna put it seam side down and just create some tension and kind of even this out. I'm kind of stretching it to be a little bit longer so it fits in the loaf pan a little better because I wanna have a symmetrical loaf. Not too much detail on shaping. If you wanna really get into the shaping, link to the sourdough sandwich bread video where I go through it in more detail. But because it is cold, it's gonna take a little bit of patience to shape it because it's gonna retract on you, it's gonna fight with you a little bit. But handling it like this and stretching it out and exposing it to the temperature of the marble or whatever your work surface is, it's warmer than where it was in the fridge, which is gonna help it come to temperature faster. Now, once it's shaped, this is a 9-inch by 5-inch loaf pan. So a 450 gram loaf fits really nice in here. And I like to cover it with a Tupperware. This is a 76 ounce Tupperware container. I'll link it in the description. It fits perfect on this particular loaf pan. I'll link it too, just to create some humidity when it's going through its final proofing. So now we're going through the final proofing. It's expanding to the last time before we bake it. And you can see what it looked like here after shaping. And now here we are. It's been 5 hours that it's just been sitting here on the counter growing. And this is about as big as I'd like to see it get, you know, maybe like 2 inches above the rim of the pan, 1.5 inches, something like that. And I have oven preheated to 425, and we're gonna bake this for 30 minutes just like we normally would. 15 minutes, and then we'll spin it, go another 15 minutes, and I'll pull it out. And it's gonna look, you know, like this. It's beautiful. And I usually go back into the oven out of the loaf pan because the sides of it are blonde, right? And I'm gonna get more color on those sides just because that's how I want it. I want it pretty, the whole thing, more of an even color. The top might get a little darker, but it's okay. I'll leave the oven at 425 and just keep coloring it, keep an eye on it, rotate it. This might take like, I don't know, 5 minutes, something like that. And then we can cool it on a wire rack and, you know, for 2 hours or at least 2 hours. And then you can slice in it and get into it. If you're gonna make sandwiches with it, I'd just cool it overnight if I were baking it at nighttime and then use it the next day. It's so light and fluffy inside. Making sandwiches with fresh baked sandwich bread can be tricky. So we've averted the crisis of my dough has bulk fermented and I've run out of time to shape it, final proof it, and bake it. Now you have a solution for that. This can also be a method in itself. Like you can do this cold method of delaying when you want to shape and bake your bread. And the final proofing phase, when you come out of the fridge, it's not much different than if my dough were room temperature. At room temperature, I'd expect more like 4 hours, but 4 to 6 would be reasonable. Something beyond that, there's something wrong with your environment, your starter, or something else. Faster than that, it must be really warm at your house. So even though it took 5 hours for it to final proof with the cold dough out of the fridge, it's still fitting in a reasonable window of time where I would expect it to be ready to bake. So we haven't really lost any ground or made this take any longer than it really has to. We are gaining some benefits. So when you cold proof dough, we slow down the fermentation process, and it helps the breakdown of nutrients and make gluten more digestible, and it also improves the flavor. It changes the flavor, and you gain control of your schedule again. Because if you can put your dough in the fridge, now you know you can because I just did it. I showed you. They can go in the fridge for 18 hours and be fine, and then you can shape it and bake it. It's almost like the method of baking in a banneton, where it's cold proofing in the basket and it can be in the fridge for up to 48 hours in the basket before you bake it. Like you've got 2 days to figure out when do you want to bake your bread. A lot more freedom in this method. So it's not just a way to troubleshoot running out of time. This could be a way of making sandwich loaves that sets you, that makes you in charge of your own schedule again.